Hello and welcome to another edition of Overcoming Illness. I am your host, Paula Denoncourt, founder and CEO of Enrich Your Health. That is ENRICHURAGALTH. I am a holistic health coach. I've been doing my business since 2010. I myself suffered from multiple food allergies. I almost died from them. So I started helping people that have food allergies, food intolerances. I like to help people with recipes. So like if you're out there and you have to eat like dairy-free, gluten-free, nut-free, I've done it all. I can provide recipes for you or maybe even your clients and patients. If you're a doctor, if you're a chiropractor, somebody like that, I would love to partner with you. But I have some on the website. It's enrichyourhealth.com. You just go to the store. I have some digital ebooks and recipe books there, or I can do customized. I decided to do this show because I had food allergies, food intolerances. I've also helped in the Lyme disease community in autoimmune. So if you haven't seen my show yet, please go back and watch some of the replays. Give Elevation TV Network some love. Go to their YouTube channel, like and subscribe. Their Facebook page, it's Elevation TV Network. I'm thankful for this platform from them. But go back and watch some of the replays. I've had some amazing guests that have cancer, congestive heart failure, mold toxicity, autism, you name it. And I have an amazing guest tonight that I'm really excited about too. I'm going to talk about the military and suicide and lots of good stuff that really needs to be talked about. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest tonight. Also, I am looking for guests for the show. So if you do want to be a guest, or you are overcoming an illness, gone through an illness, or even maybe a mom or a spouse or a practitioner, apostle, whatever it might be, reach out to me. You can get me on my email, info@enrichyourhealth.com. And that's ENRICHURAHEALTH.com if you're listening. Or you can go to Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, message me there, or text me 508-330-9665. And I'll get back to you because I do work full time. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest tonight that I'm really excited about, and I'm so thankful that he's here. Mr. Whiskey is a young and ambitious creator who recently transitioned out of the service as an electrician's mate nuclear operator. He's always had a passion for entertaining and helping others. So he started a comedy and life advice podcast to help highlight the uniqueness of the Navy nuclear community, but found himself quickly going beyond that. His show has expanded to people from all walks of life, and he invites us all to be part of his crew, his show, A Nautical Voyage Across the Seas of Our Lives. Not only that, he's an author, an actor, a voice actor, comedian, speaker, singer, and the membership coordinator for the PNN Academy, a school of Hollywood and comedy. That's like quite the bio. This person is very young. I will just say that. So it's quite the amazing bio. So you have already blown me away just with your bio. So welcome, Mr. Whiskey. Thank you for being here tonight.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Paula, so much for that beautiful introduction. And it is nice to hear some of my attributes every now and then. I try not to let my ego get too wild, but yeah, I'm trying to, there's so much life to live out there. And I look at my generation and the generations following me, and they spend so much of their time in their bed, in their phone, in La La Land. Now you got the new VR headsets taking over, and there's so much out there that people aren't chasing after. And unfortunately, we live in a society that's set up where you have to work hard. You have to be ambitious. You can't just, everyone wants instant gratification and everything handed to them. And that's not how it is.
Oh, I so agree. I know we were just talking a little bit about that before the start of the show. I was just saying that it makes me a little bit nervous and apprehensive because of so much that is going on in the world. We are going a little bit backwards as much as we are going forward. And I think today's society, some of the youth, they're just so much, they're very spoiled. And it just makes me a little bit nervous and apprehensive. Like if things do go a little bit backwards, like say we lose the internet for a week or something, what are these people going to do? Like they don't know how to pivot. It's all they know. You know what I mean? Like, would I be lost without my cell phone, without the internet? Yeah. But if I lost it, I'd be okay. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't go out of my mind. I grew up without having the internet for a while. We had like, I'm dating myself, but we had like the DOS
Right.
system. I have a computer in my room. This will make you laugh. I had a black and white TV in my bedroom.
Wow.
With no, maybe 5 channels. I had 3 channels that were good, one that was clear, and then one other channel that was fuzzy. You didn't even get a clear channel. So we could talk about that kind of stuff forever, but it just makes me a little nervous that today's society, some of the youth, like you said, they're always buried in all this AI stuff, which I'm learning about it too because it is expanding. But at the same time, we have to be ready to pivot if we have to. So I'm excited to talk to you about some different touchy subjects tonight that really need to be discussed. So one of the first things I want to discuss is we don't think many of us are familiar with what an electrician's mate nuclear operator is, or the whole nuclear side of the military in general. So tell us a little bit about that, because some people think of this as like nuclear warheads. So tell us a little bit about that.
Of course, and I'm not really hoping I got the nuclear explosion behind me for laughs, but right, electricians make nuclear operator. Try to say it 10 times fast, so to speak.
Hmm.
I didn't even know what it was when I joined the military. I was just told nuke. And within the realm of reactor, and when I say reactor, I'm just referring to a division, a group of individuals on the ship who their job is working in reactor, working on the reactor. And so for those who don't know, the aircraft carriers and the submarines of the United States Navy are nuclear powered. And so they have a reactor on board that needs to be taken care of. And we like to joke in the reactor, the reactor never sleeps, so neither do we. It is
Hmm.
one of the most demanding jobs, if not the most demanding, in the US Navy and in the military in general. It's different than obviously fighting on the front lines, but the schedule, every holiday you're on the ship with the reactor almost, weekends, anytime like everyone else on the ship is going away. And, in the military, I would say, at least in the Navy, that's how it is for a reactor, for the galley workers and supply, and then, the security. Those three types of people, those three jobs, you're like always on the ship. You need to be. And so what an electrician's mate nuclear operator does is that's focused purely on the electrical side, getting the power from the reactor to the rest of the ship or submarine. And then you have, mechanics who are more mechanical side, valves, piping, all that. Then you have electronics technicians, which is more computer based, more of those smaller electrical parts that are very specialized. Then you have ELTs who are basically chemists. And so
Hmm.
there's all these different jobs within the nuclear navy, but we're all nukes. And so, like you said, most people think nuke, they think like a warhead, which is true. That is also a nuke. But
Right.
we're nukes in the sense that we're nuclear operators. So we help monitor, maintain, work on this equipment, make sure everything's running. We basically turn the ship on and off. We're in charge of how fast it moves and where it goes, so to speak. And it can be very rewarding. It can be very draining. And sleep. If you like sleep, don't be a nuke because the rotating shift work, like I said, the reactor never sleeps and neither do we. So at night, someone needs to be there. During the day, someone needs to be there. On the weekend, on the holiday, like I said, if the reactor's on, we're on.
Wow. And you would think with all the technology today that wouldn't be the case, that it would be
Right.
able to be run smoothly, right?
You know what? There are so many manuals out there of every nuclear reactor incident in the world, and especially in America as well. And within our fleet, you have to keep track of everything. And sure, it's not 3 Mile Island or Fukushima, but anything that
Mm,
goes wrong, we want to make sure that doesn't happen because the safety of the American people is on our shoulders. You
right.
know, nuclear fallout is no joke. It's something, it's not even just a national matter, it's an international matter. It's something that affects the world. When Fukushima happened, United States soldiers and sailors were affected by it. That cloud spread everywhere. Chernobyl. And so a
Yeah.
lot of people have this very bad mindset towards nuclear power, this negative mindset just because of these few incidents, which were bad incidents, don't get me
Right.
wrong, but
Right.
there is nuclear power operations happening every day, 24/7 around the world in Canada, here, starting in Australia, and it's done safely and it powers so much. And actually on my show, we've talked a lot about micro reactors. They are trying to make all this condensed down to hopefully the size where, for every few cities, you can have just one small reactor powering multiple cities remotely. You don't even need someone to be operating it. That's the level we're trying to get at. And the
Wow.
reason, you said you thought it would be smoother and more advanced by now, the caution is what's holding us back, and for good reason. We can make it smooth, but we want to make it smooth and stay smooth. We don't want it to happen
Right.
like this behind me here.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So paint us a picture. Let's go back a little bit. Did you decide yourself you wanted to be in the military? How did that happen?
no. No, not at all.
No.
So,
Okay.
the if you did not want to join the military and you end up in it, what you'll hear a lot, what I've heard a lot is, well, no one forced you to sign. And that's true to an extent. Specifically, Chief will say, no one put a gun to the back of your head and made you sign. No, but there was a metaphorical gun, so to speak. Originally, my parents, I grew up in a home where I wasn't allowed to really leave the house or do much. My dad was a paranoid tyrant who suffered with alcoholism and drug addiction and narcissism. I wasn't
Okay.
even allowed to use a stove, because that was too dangerous. I actually operated a whole, parts of a submarine before I ever knew how to use a stove. It was embarrassing. I was home with my shipmates and they're like, Mr.
Wow.
Whiskey, go use the stove go, help us cook. And I was like, I don't know how to use one. And they're like, you just piloted a submarine today. What do you mean? And I
Wow.
wasn't allowed to, chewing gum was too dangerous. And so I kind of grew up where, what my parents did is what I had to do. And they never prepared me for college. They never saw it. They raised me with this dream to be an officer in the Coast Guard. And I was going to go to the Coast Guard Academy. They had spent a lot of money and training, and a lot of my life had been devoted to going there. And when I got a job working as an ice cream salesman on the beach, it was actually the first time I really interacted with people. I got to, leave the house and talk to all these people, and they opened up my mind. And I was like, I'm living my parents' dream. I don't want to do this. My mom had a perfect gunsmanship score for the Marines, and she wanted to join and be a warrior. And she ended up a stay-at-home mom with 6 kids. And so, she kind of was projecting that onto me. My father was a cop for 25 years, and he was projecting that onto me as well. And so I
Mm.
ended up joining the Air Force, and the day before I shipped out and finished all the paperwork, they tried changing the job on me, from photojournalism to crypto linguist to learning another language and being a spy and spending most of my life on a plane and
Wow.
having never left my small hometown because I wasn't really allowed to. I mean, that was terrifying. That wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a photojournalist. I love writing. I've published 9 books already. I've got about 4 more coming out this year. And so the Air Force just put such a sour taste in my mouth for the military. I was like, so this is the military. Lead you on right to the day before you ship out and then try to pull a fast one on you, which has happened to a lot of people. And
Wow.
so I was like, you know what? Let's be an entrepreneur. Let's work. And I have some connections and let's just like try to go into the working world. And then COVID-19 came
Mm.
and, that shut down the working world pretty much. That wasn't an
Mhm.
option. And I wasn't prepared for college. I didn't know anything about college. All I knew was that it existed. And I was smart enough to be a nuclear operator. So I think I could have gone to college. I could
Yeah, I was,
probably been able
yeah.
to do that. And so I had no choice but to look into the military. I had a very bad experience with the recruiting office for the Navy, and I was like, nope, not doing this, not at all. My mom forced me to go again, and I had a better time, and I was going to go for underwater welding. or photojournalism. I was debating between those two until I took the
Mhm.
ASVAB. They said, we'd like you to be a nuke because, there's not a lot of the ratio, and we'll get into it, of how many nukes stay in or make it through the program to how many, apply.
Mm,
They need nukes. They need people to run these reactors. Without the reactors, we can't run the fleet. And so I don't want to discourage anyone from being a nuclear operator, but there is a lot of truth and investigation required if you're going to do that. There's a lot of, there's a clip I see on social media all the time. Is it worth it? Only if you can handle it, if you're strong enough,
mm,
so take that with a grain of salt. But, you know, I signed the contract, and then I called my recruiter eventually because, it just spoke to me. I was like, this is still not what I want to do.
mhm,
And then the family drama was so tumultuous that I ended up just calling back the recruiter and going in. And then I picked electrician's mate nuclear operator because out of all the nukes, it is the hardest job, but it has the most benefits outside of the Navy. And I said, I already don't want to do this. You might as well embrace the suck, so to speak, and go with the
mm,
hardest option if it's going to get me the most benefits. And then I went into the military, and it just never was my thing. And there was a point where I was almost 26% ahead of everyone else and of what I needed to do for training. And I had a great mentor, and I was like, you know what? I want to stay in for 20 years. And I had a dream I was chasing, and there was some political stuff that kind of happened in the military that changed some things. And then I ended up changing my mind, and I saw some, it only got worse and worse as I stayed
mm,
in the military.
mm,
And I had some medical issues. And when it came down to, do you want to stay in or not? Because I could have fought to stay in, of course.
mhm,
I was like, you know what? I think there is a life out there that is calling me, and I'm going to
mm,
answer that call. And, I love our country. I am very, very patriotic, something that is lacking in America nowadays.
mm,
One of my heroes, Tom McDonald, said it best. He said, who hates America the most? Americans, and we are a torn, divided nation. And I want to see us reunited, and I want to see us love our country, and I want to see our country love us back. I think part of
mm,
the issue is our country is not loving us too much as the people. And I don't just mean minorities or the middle class or any of that. I mean all of us.
right.
Honestly, that's how I feel. And so that's how, long story short, how I ended up in the military.
Wow, it's fascinating though. Like you had like that must have been a very controlling family. Your mom was in the Marines. Is that what you said? Yeah.
No, so she wanted to. She had a perfect gunmanship score. My mom is a sharpshooter, and she turned that away. She turned away from that and her
Oh,
job in general to be a housewife to my father, who just used her for kids. Half of her face is made out of metal because my dad broke her skull open on their honeymoon, and
oh,
she spent her life trapped. I never realized the extent of domestic violence in my household because my mom kept it from all of us. She
mm,
stayed for us kids, which I regret. I actually rather my life not exist than for my mother to have to go through that, for any woman. And
right.
unfortunately, my father, he was a tyrant, and he had her in bondage financially because she had
Yeah.
quit all her jobs for him. She had six kids, three from before him even. And so he kind of just used her he was dependent on her,
Mm,
sexually, as well as he could not do anything. My father resisted technology from when it first came about when he was growing up. He said, I refuse. And so my father doesn't know how to do anything. He barely can use a phone because he is a stubborn man and has resisted to the very end, just like I'm seeing people do with AI. And I
mm,
think it's good to have your morals and to fight against something. But if it's an overwhelming defeat that you have to accept, I think you should embrace it in a
mhm,
certain way that still respects yourself and your beliefs, but allows
right.
you to function. Because if you
Right.
can't take care of yourself or your family, that's not what a real man is. A real man is a protector and a provider.
Wow. Amazing. What about your siblings? Like, how are they now?
So I would have never expected either of my younger sisters to be in the military. I would have never wanted it
Wow.
for them. And it's funny how they both ended up going into the Navy as well, had never ever
Wow.
thought about it. And I truly believe, my mom argues with me, my sisters argue with me. 100% I believe it was pushed on by my parents.
Mm,
You know, and I'm proud of them. My sister, who is the oldest of my youngest sisters, she was the first female in 5 years to meet the physical fitness standards for a special job. She went to train on, quote, military survival island off the West Coast. She just won a competition the other day for weightlifting. She is a lot more muscular than I am. I mean, she is huge and she is smart.
yeah.
Her and I always rivaled because I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. I was a natural genius. I just knew stuff and could pick stuff up. She was put in hours and hours of studying to meet my level. And so, we were both smart in different
Mm,
ways. She just had to always work hard. And so we always called her bookworm. We always thought she was going to college. That's what it seemed like. And she went into the military and I think part of it too comes from her physical strength of how she manages to handle all the, because the military is full of meatheads and guys who, it's hard when you're in an environment that is 95% male, especially the nuclear
and
community is
yeah.
almost strictly male. And
Mm,
so even my sister, she's a special type of aviation job. I think she's one of the only females. And, she's spoken to me about some issues, which is why
mm,
I didn't want her to join in the first place. There's a lot of
right.
good change being done in the military to prevent harassment, sexual harassment, and assault. And I like the change I'm seeing. They're doing a good job. But unfortunately,
Mm,
it still happens.
right.
And it's hard. My sister said she can't win. If she does bad at her job, it's because she's a woman. If she does good at her job, it's because she's a woman. She's sleeping with the chief. She said she
Uh,
cannot win. And so she was
mm,
gonna do 20 years. And we actually spoke the other day, and it's gotten to the point where she's like, the job, I love the job. I love the military. I've been promoted twice in a year, but the environment, I just can't take it, even some of the leadership. And we'll definitely get into leadership and environment later because that's such a big part of the military.
right.
And my
Right.
youngest sister is gonna go to boot camp in about 5, 7 weeks here. And she's my baby sister. I still thought she was in fifth grade, and I'll be going to her graduation now from
Wow.
high school. So to think that I blinked and she was just like that. Her and I grew up like best friends, twins, inseparable, and until the military. Actually, I
Mm,
lost that connection, and we'll speak on the isolation of the military. Even if you try to stay connected with your family, I'll explain why it's such a difficult thing, more than people would think. But she's gonna go in boot camp, and I'm very against it, but I'm gonna support her
mm,
because she is my sister. I do love her,
right.
and if
Right.
I can't stop her, I'm going to make sure she's safe and that she's going to do well.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Fascinating family. My goodness. Wow.
Lots of drama for sure.
I know, right? So let's go into a topic that is so needed to be talked about. You and I spoke off mic and you mentioned suicide and stress quite a bit. Can you tell us more about that? Is this restricted to actively deployed service members, or is this just anyone in the military?
It's so interesting when you look at who is taking their life in the military because of, there's this mindset typically that it's only the lower enlisted, that the higher ups, they've been in, like you build an immunity to it, they think. But, when we look at race and gender and rank, you know who that matters to? It matters to the investigators and to us. What it doesn't matter to is a person who wants to take their life. It doesn't matter if they're a chief. They don't care who they are, or where they are. The book I have coming out this year, my nonfiction is called Who Would Miss Me? And it's actually about suicide and identity in the military. And that is the number one phrase. I've had a lot of people try to take their life in my presence. I've had a lot of difficult
Mm,
conversations. Always, Mr. Whiskey, who would miss me? No one's going to care. And you try to name people and they're like, they don't really care. And so people get shocked when they're like, how could this officer kill himself in the military? He had a wife and kids. But those wife and kids only have as much meaning as he gives them.
mhm,
Sure, it's his wife and his kids, and that societally, that means a lot. But to a suicidal person, whether it's a mental illness they can't control or it's the result of the life they're living, it puts them in a mindset where they don't think rationally. It is a state of frantic emotion. And we had about 1 to 3 a month on average at the nuclear base I was at. And the flag was always at half mast. We would have the flag at half mast to, honor them and to inform everyone. They would jump off the roof of the one building. The
Hmm.
one particular building, we we used to call it, we used to say we should install a suicide slide up there because everyone would kill themselves from that particular building. And it was awful. No one wanted to live there. It's kind of off-putting to live in the building where everyone is taking their life. There was a
Right.
hospital that, a lot of sailors ended up in. And when we talk about, I mentioned earlier, the ratio of nukes that go in and come out, you know, out of my class of about 30 in power school, I would say I'm one of maybe five who actually made it to the fleet. And what I want to get into is, it's the worst part about the military is the frauds and the malingerers, which is a military term for faking or exaggerating a illness to get out of work.
Uh,
What happens is there is a culture where if you can use suicide or mental health issues and fake it to get out of the military, why not? And I know for a fact because there was a shipmate who got out, and then all five of his roommates also got out at the same time. They all had the same symptoms. The worst part about the military is the abuse of the military trying to be responsible and take care of the people who need help, and then people use it to their advantage. It got to the point on my ship. Now, the ship I was on did have almost 15 deaths within a year and a half. We had 3 suicides in a week. When I left, there was a murder, military on military. That's how bad the stress had gotten to. And
oh
our
my,
captain, God bless his soul, he was crying. It was difficult time. And, a man had killed his wife, and both of them were on the ship, as far as I know, or
hmm.
neighboring ships. But I remember it was uncanny. I was on watch guarding a reactor space, and suddenly the ship went quiet, and I stuck my head out the door, and the ship was empty. And I was like, "Where did everyone go?" And they were gone for almost an hour. And then later, my one buddy came down. He was like, "Mr. Whiskey, were you at the all hands call?" And I was like, "No, what happened?" He goes, "There was a murder." And it blew my mind. He was like, "The captain is up there crying," and he called an emergency meeting. And the
Hmm.
captain actually said it was the failure of the leaders on the ship because all that stress that was going home bottled up into that. And so on my ship, unless you were actively suicidal or displaying anything like that or homicidal, you could not get help for a minimum of 2 weeks to a couple months because every single appointment spot was booked by someone seeking mental health help.
Oh,
And there was a huge wave of people leaving the ship because it got to the point where medical was like, anyone who's not feeling well, you can separate. Goodbye. And, it's unfortunate because then the people who actually need help don't get help because what happens is the military has set it up as a checkbox system. Because I've been through the medical program. You go there, they have you fill out a piece of paper on a scale of 1 to 10. Are you enjoying the things you normally do? Are you sleeping? Are you anxious? This and that. And then they talk to you. They just go over it and they're like, okay, come back in like 2 weeks or so. Though the one guy who got out of the military around the same time as me just smoked weed and got out because there's a no drug tolerance policy. And it was because
hmm.
he waited a year for a single therapy appointment that was like half an hour of just feel better. And so he's like, forget this. If they're not going to help me, I will. And he used weed to go to sleep every night or to deal with work. And I've seen that on a lot of ships. I've seen a lot of people get in trouble for weed. And it's become the mindset they don't care. If you guys aren't going to help us, we're going to help ourselves. But there's also this, again, people abusing the system where they're like, we're going to do drugs to get out of the military because it's a general discharge. And if you have a clean record, you can upgrade it to honorable after 6 months. So, boom. And if you self report, it's honorable. And it's like, okay, I got out of the military just by breaking their drug tolerance policy. It got so bad that there were rumors they were changing it to the captain's discretion of what happened to you because they were losing so many people. I know more people who were getting out of the military than going in or staying in. They
Wow.
started a program on my ship where they would wear a paper clip which stood for people against people ever re-enlisting, civilian life is preferred. And civilian life is preferred for a lot of reasons, but the mindset was that even these nukes who were being offered sometimes up to $180,000 was one of the biggest numbers I heard, sometimes 120, $100,000 for 2 more years. They were like, no, because we just can't do it. And
Wow.
so when we talk about stress, it's from a lot of things.
Mm,
And the leadership is the biggest thing. It's the command climate, and it trickles down into how we treat each other in the military. So
hmm
the suicides are bad. I've had a lot of veterans and active duty members come on my show to talk about the stats. Are you familiar, Ms. Paula, with the term 22 a day?
Is that the 22 push-ups?
No, it's how many veterans on average take their life each day.
Right. And then they developed a challenge to do like 22 push-ups in honor of that.
Oh,
I've seen,
wow. Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
I've seen a few things. I know one of the guests who came on my show, Douglas Brinker, amazing guy. He took his life twice in the military and they brought him back both times. And now he works as the person you call and talk to when you're suicidal. He's paying back how they
hmm
saved him.
Wow.
He's publishing a book, and I think it comes out this summer, and it's 22 chapters representing the 22 a day, which he said, looking at the statistics, the numbers are more between 30 and 40 a day.
Wow.
And one of the worst parts is that for each suicide or death, about 5 to 8, even up to 15 people are affected each time. You got to think of family, friends, and it's awful. It really is. And there's a lot of stigmas about getting help too, because you get called a fraud. People say you're faking it, sadding out. A big
Mm,
term in the nuclear navy is you're sadding out, or you're a sad boy. And then your leadership will be like, well, don't you care about who's gonna have to pick up your slack now that you're leaving the military? Who's gonna stand your watch?
Oh my
You
goodness.
know,
Wow.
they really bully you, and they call you a snake. Oh, you're faking it, and this and that. And these are leaders who know nothing about you. All they know is your name and your rank, and that's it, because they've never actually had a conversation with you. They've never actually talked to you to see if you're okay. Even the medical personnel barely know. And they had to it they because they had to filter through fakes and reals, they end up just saying, I remember I went for one session one time, and it ended up being like 5 minutes. The guy was like, well, you have control of your emotions, so you shouldn't feel bad. And I was like, okay, thanks for the help. And
Again.
that same guy told one of my buddies the same thing in one of their sessions. And I was like, well, this isn't helping anyone, you know? And so I have had some shipmates who are supportive. I've had leadership who is supportive, but it really depends. The biggest thing is we're kind of hindering each other. And so that's why when I say between the suicides and people faking mental health illnesses to get out, the nuclear program is stretched very thin on numbers. And then because of that high demand on these individuals who are staying in, this stress, the sleep deprivation, the toxicity of the command climate makes them want to get out. So they'll either get out through medical issues because now they have real mental health issues, or they just don't re-enlist. Now you have a retention crisis and a recruiting crisis. Our retention and recruiting is at an all-time low, as far as I know. If it, at minimum, one of the lowest points in American history. So bad that recently we covered on my show, you no longer need a high school diploma or a GED to join the military. So
Oh wow.
now they have lowered that standard. You need a certain score in the ASVAB.
hmm
Now, guess what else? They have lowered, just from the few years I was in, they lowered the physical standards over and over again. The people in the military becoming weaker and weaker physically. A woman who is 18 only has to do about 10 to 17 push-ups. When I was in, you had to do about 50 to 60 for a male. I think they've lowered it down to 30 or 40. The
Wow.
plank went from 5 minutes to now a minute and a half, I believe. I
Mm,
haven't been keeping up with the newest standards. They are now allowing males to wear earrings if they're within certain regulations. They are allowing women to wear form-fitting athletic attire, to have eyelash extensions, to have their hair certain ways. And I'm not saying people shouldn't express themselves, but that there's a time and place for that.
Right.
There's a standard.
Yeah.
And but they're still making us shave every day. Men still have to shave every day, which aggravates me. It's like, all right, my friend put it best. We're a bunch of baby-faced men in uniforms playing dress up. That's what we
Hmm.
look like. Obesity the rise of obesity in ranks is also on the rise, not just in America, but now in the military. And so they are being more lenient about how heavy you can be, about physical fitness standards, about education standards. So we're combating the retention and recruiting crisis with more numbers, but the quality is not so great. And I'm not saying if you dropped out of high school, you're not smart, but let's take a look at it. I mean, typically people who drop out of high school, it's not because they're not smart. It's because of a family situation, or they have an attitude of they don't care, F the world. I mean, is that who I want on the front line defending my life, defending
Hmm.
my wife's life or my kids or, my friends or family?
Hmm.
So it's something to think about. But Miss Paula, I'll let you have the mic for a little bit. I know I've been going on here and there's just a
Well,
lot to cover.
oh, absolutely. And like I said, it's a topic that really needs to be talked about. I don't think people think about it. I mean, let's pivot a little bit. How did it affect you? Like, I'm sure you met some military people, the signs were there. How did that affect you when, you might have known them somewhat, known some of the signs were there, and then they did kill themselves? Did
Wow.
you witness that, and how did it affect you?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking. I actually started a series not too long ago on my show called the Lone Sailor series. And one of the stories I shared, which I'll gladly share now, is boot camp.
Hmm.
A couple of weeks in, that was my first experience with one of the toughest I consider this to be one of the most difficult scenarios in the military. One of your friends, one of your, we're coworkers, but we also eat, sleep, use the bathroom, live together, right? I
Right.
mean, the bond you develop, it's hyped up in the military, and it is worth the hype. It is true. When you spend that much time with someone, even if it's just 2 weeks, not to
Hmm.
mention, I've mentioned before, the time distortion of being in the military is like, we say it's long days and short weeks. And I remember 2 weeks would feel like a month. A week would feel like 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Military, because you're sleeping so much less and doing so much more, it's like
Hmm.
time is doubled. And so not only are you spending a lot of time with these people, you're spending double the amount of time that people normally spend with each other. And you
Right.
have no choice, which is also
Right.
one of the worst parts. Being stuck with a coworker you don't like, and then you go home and they're brushing their teeth next to you. You can't
Hmm.
escape.
Yeah.
So now I work from home. It's like, oh, thank goodness.
I
I
know.
don't have to worry about it. Maybe if I go to the grocery store, I might bump into someone. But
Yeah.
yeah, so in boot camp, I was put in this situation. Again, one of the most difficult situations in the military. Someone you care about a lot is expressing thoughts of suicide or homicide. And so the question is, do you report them or not? If I
Mm.
report them, they could end up out of the military. They could end up getting separated from medical. They could end up locked up in the hospital for a few days, which is never a good thing for anyone who's mentally ill or, who is just borderline or expressing themselves. And so you got to think, how is this going to affect their career? If they have a wife or kids or a husband and kids or a significant other, how's this going to affect that? If they're supposed to go on leave and see their family, is this going to take away their only free time? Will this set them back in training? Now they have to go back through training again. And so it's this
Mm.
awful situation where it's like, okay, if I get them help and they were just venting, because you know what?
Right.
There's a lot of dark humor in the military. There's a lot of
Yeah.
venting, a lot of statements that aren't going to be brought to fruition. But
Hmm.
it's like, okay, if I do this and now they get separated and the military was all they have no family, they have no friends, they have no skills. I just screwed over their life. If
Hmm.
I don't do it and they take their life, or the lives of others, well, that's blood on my hands. And I said in my episode of my show that I would feel guilty. That's just me personally. I know some people would be like, "Hey, they made their decision. It's not on you." I am a very emotional, empathetic people person, and so I
Yeah.
would feel that. And I had a shipmate in boot camp be like, "Mr. Whiskey, you're my best friend," and he had family trauma going on. He had, boot camp just he wasn't getting along with other shipmates. He wasn't getting along with the leaders. He was
Hmm.
just not everyone is cut out for the military. I'll say it plainly. I mean, that's the truth. Only about 5 to 8% of America even qualifies physically or education wise. And then you got to think of that 5 to 8%, does their personality align? It's not for everyone. And especially with the younger generations, we've talked about being spoiled comes with the more spoiled you are, typically the more authority issues you have. It's not always
Oh,
the case, but
yep.
I would say for the most part. And trust me, having authority issues in the military, I mean, I've been there, done that on my friends. You end up developing authority issues through the military if you don't have them because of some of the toxic leaders. Again, there are great leaders, and I'll talk about that. But shipmate told me, Mr. Whiskey, I've got a list of people in this compartment I'm going to kill in order from priority to not priority. Of course, you're spared. You're my best friend. And I barely talked to this guy. He
Oh my,
slept maybe in the rack next to me. And being a listening person, even though he couldn't get along with anyone else, I would just sit there and listen to him. I wouldn't even talk much. And I think that's what he needed, someone to just listen to him. And it got to the point I talked to I call him Yeoman, my best friend from boot camp. He was going to be a monk, very holy guy, and he was smart and he's much older than me. I was like, "What should we do, man?" And he's like, "This is a tough situation even for him too because it's like boot camp is a pivotal point where who knows if this is going to be on his record or not? What if the U.S. Navy deems him untrainable, can't even go to the boot camp for other military branches?
mm,
And what if this is just a boot camp phase? He's only got 4 weeks left. Let's just let him be, and then he can go to his chain of command, his new job, and be happy and fine. We ended up he's got separated. Me and Yeoman ended up reporting him,
I,
and
yeah,
he got put into a holding unit, and he got the help he needed. And I think he was happier. I'm not sure.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
sure, but there are other shipmates. My one best friend who's in right now, he is a mentor in charge of several sailors. He is the furthest qualified ahead. He re-enlisted. He is entirely successful. I mean, how many times has he talked to me about taking his life or going off and living in a cave so no one can bother him? I mean, there was times he showed up, and he's one of the stories I share the most. He showed up at my room late at night. He was like, "Mr. Whiskey, can we go for a drive? Nowhere in particular, just drive until we don't feel like it." And I'm like, "Man, I gotta wake up early and this and that." But we went and we just drove. I don't even think he and I spoke. I think eventually he kind of just opened up about some things. But
Hmm.
that story that night had a huge impact on me. One, I
Hmm.
realized, I always tell people who are struggling to speak with their kids, especially parents to kids, but even anyone with their friends, the car is a great space because it's intimate yet distant, right? Because you're sitting next to each other, you're in personal space, but you're not looking at each other. And I
Hmm.
said it's great for parents to get their kids to open up because if you are at home and you're like, "All right, son or daughter, sit on the couch or the bed, we're going to talk," it feels like a disciplinary is going to happen, right? It feels like scolding is
Yeah,
going to happen. But the
that's a good
car
point.
is like a casual, intimate space.
Hmm.
And we just drove and he just needed to think about some things or just have me listen or just play some music and get his mind off of things. And so
Hmm.
I remember Douglas Brinker, who I mentioned before, he had a suicidal Marine calling at 1 a.m. and they were on the phone to 3 a.m. and he had to wake up, probably at 5 a.m. But it's like you have to take the time to be there for those people. And I tell you, your sleep is nowhere near as valuable as someone's life. But
Hmm.
again, the
Yeah.
point I'm trying to get at is if I had reported him and said, "Petty officer, so and so is thinking about talking about taking their life or whatever." What if he had been kicked out of the Navy through medical separation or, held back or put in a hospital? I don't even know. You know, there's a guilt too. It's like,
That's it.
well, how
That's
is this going to
uh,
affect our friendship? But at the
yeah.
end of the day, what's more valuable, your friendship or their life? And you
Mhm.
got to think a good friend. So I want to emphasize that because it can happen in the civilian world, but it's nowhere near the level of consequences behind your action if you report something right. Civilian world, they might, who knows what'll happen. Maybe the police, if you call them, will inform their workplace. And their workplace might
Mhm.
say, hey, we don't want you working here. The military, everything is reported mandatorily, and it is all documented. And
Yeah.
so I'm not sure what your question was. I think it was about
Well,
you, well,
it's
my personal
definitely,
experience with
yeah.
suicides. And,
What,
and
how
so
did it,
I've had
yeah,
conversations.
how did it affect you was the question, because like you say, it's a really tough place to be in because there's so much. Like, do you report them? Do you not report them? Do you, you don't want them to kill themselves. You don't, there's so much. Some of
Right.
them are friends. I mean, that's a lot of weight on your shoulders. So when you think about it in the civilian world, do you step in and, like you say, just get a doctor or hospital, police, whatever? They just get, when I worked for a prison for 22 years, for those of you who've never watched the show, I believe that it was called Section 12. You just get them put in the hospital. They get put on Section 12 and then they're watched in the hospital. That's it. Either you report that or you don't. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, or maybe you intervene with family or something. That's it though. Like, it's not, you've got way much on your shoulder. There's so much weight on your shoulders. This is this person's career. This is their livelihood. This is, is this them just venting? Like,
Right.
the other thing, like, we talked a little bit about this working in a prison. I worked in an all male prison. Like I said, if you don't know me, I started in 1990. We had about 700-800 inmates. When I left, it was more like 1,200, 1,300 inmates. It was an all male prison. And one of the things that the officers do, like you said, they have a way of dealing with things. I call it oppression. They laugh and joke about everything, but some of them are really dying inside. So they might be laughing, but and I just have this gift anyway. Like, I can see through things. You know what I mean? So I used to call myself Dear Abby. People used to tell me all their problems. If you don't know who Dear Abby was, years ago, they had this article thing in the paper, and everybody who had problems wrote to Dear Abby.
My dad
So
loved that. I used to read that with my dad, so I know exactly what you're talking about. That's actually really
some
funny.
people were like, "Who the heck is Dear
I haven't
Abby?"
heard that in years.
I called myself Dear Abby because back in the day, really dating myself. I'm 56. I'm not afraid to say it. Um, they weren't allowed, like, to call out on the blocks. So officers couldn't call, like, make a phone call to their house or whatever. But if they came into my office, like, say on a lunch break, a supper break, whatever, there was a phone that would call out because I was a dispatcher. So their excuse to come in my office was they had to make a phone call. But half the time they would tell me their life story. So, but that was because they needed somebody to vent, somebody to let it all out, because they oppressed everything. They couldn't go home and tell their wife their problems in the jail. You know what I mean? They couldn't. They held it all
Right.
in. And so sometimes when they're holding it all in, that's when the mental health problem arises. So you, just like I said, you had a lot of weight on your shoulders, to
Well,
really,
now that I
I'm,
think about it, I understand your question more. And,
yeah,
I've even been suicidal before many times. I've
right,
had the same people I've stopped stop me. That's kind of what happens. We form this accountability brotherhood. And, you know, I do believe if I wasn't so religious, I would be dead 100%. I know that much.
mhm,
That's kind of
yeah,
what's kept me in check. Because at first it was my youngest sister. I had to be there for her. And as we grew distant in the military, that mindset, who would miss me, right? Not even my youngest sister. And so the
wow,
fear of the biblical you know consequences is kind of
right,
what kept me in check. And my
me too,
relationship with God
yeah,
is a whole episode on its own that has changed throughout the military.
yeah,
Most military people actually lose their faith. A lot of people associate, they watch the movies and there's always a soldier kissing a cross saying, please Jesus, this victory. a lot of military members actually lose their faith. I've seen it firsthand. But
Yeah.
I have a group, my best friends who are still in the service, and we talk about that stuff. But there was a smoke pit on the submarine base, and a lot of the sailors would go there to have their smoke break, and then they would be there for hours or very often, and to get away from work. And it was
Mm,
a very negative, you know, just area full of sailors who they were most of them had medical issues or most of them were struggling,
mm,
and it ended up being where I became the entertainer of the smoke pit. I don't even smoke. I would go there and they would, negativity vomit all over me.
I
And
know.
I would, make light jokes. I would
Yeah.
entertain with stories of my horrendous dating life at the time and, get their mind off of things. Or I would just listen to them for a long
That's
time.
okay.
But
Yeah.
what do I do with all of that? If you're a sponge for all that negativity. And I was thinking about it, and it definitely did at the time get me down because I was already feeling depressed and suicidal myself, right? So to take on everyone else's misfortune as well is quite the burden. And I think now what I'm doing now that I'm out, because it got worse in the fleet, you know, I've mentioned I've published multiple books, and my fictional books embody a lot of my real life, either my
Mm,
own feelings or characters I met in real life. I've also published two collections of poetry, both about 500 or more pages.
wow.
And even now, I think Mr. Whiskey himself is the embodiment of all of that. And I think by spreading this message, talking with people about it, and writing about it is how I deal with it, as well as the comedy.
Mm,
And I'm also still at a point. Actually, we're coming up here. May 9th will be my 1 year out of the service anniversary. So I'm still fresh out, I like to
yeah.
say. And, I think there's still a lot of stuff I haven't dealt with. What was
Mm,
interesting is the Vietnam veterans who came on my show said they had put everything in a concrete box. And 50 to 70 years later is when it all broke down. 50 years later, there was a Vietnam veteran. He hadn't thought about Vietnam for over 50 years. And then suddenly, everything came out. And I think that's I'm in that concrete box still, even though I have my writing, I have my podcast, there are certain things that will trigger memories, or if I start to actually think about it, it takes me to a dark, dark place. And that's why my
yeah.
book hasn't been out yet. Who Would Miss Me? Because it's going to reveal my real identity and combine my two lives. Because right now I'm living a double life, which is also taking a huge toll on me, being Mr. Whiskey and then not Mr. Whiskey, and but the book is about suicide and identity, and so it's going to combine my two lives, and it's going to reveal a lot of personal family drama and trauma that
Mhm.
is important because it's a memoiristic book, but it's also going to be a self-help guidebook and
Good.
full of
Yeah.
military jargon and, like I said, who would miss me? And it's going to really go into suicide and identity. And the difficulty writing that is going back to some of those places that I've left behind. You know, I'm sure you've met veterans who don't want to talk about it. Even some of us who are grandparents won't share with us what they went through. And
I know.
oftentimes, right before they pass, is when they'll share all of that because they're like, all right, I can go back to that place because I'm going to the good place, hopefully. But,
Mm,
a lot of them, and I get it now, having been in, there's stuff I don't want to think about, not just upsetting, but angers me. And then it ruins my day, right? I'm in a civilian world trying to help other people, and I'm out here reliving my military days, arguing with some, person who has never thought about me again. Some
mm,
leader who didn't think about us then, doesn't think about us now. But I'm
mm.
over here still arguing with him in my head.
Right. Well, we are
Yes.
coming up on the end of the hour here, but this has been amazing. My God, we could talk forever about all this stuff. Thank you so much for sharing all this amazing experiences, and it's just blows my mind how much you've done in so little time, and are still doing. So tell
Thank you.
everybody how they can connect with your show, connect with you, anything that you're doing, anything you have available, any social media they can follow you on, whatever.
Right. So as mentioned, way back in the beginning of the episode, I am the founder and host of Couple of Nukes, a comedy and life advice podcast available on YouTube as a YouTube show and anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, etc. I'm also launching a brand new podcast well, as the day of this recording, this Monday coming up, called Radiating Faith. It is a faith-based podcast, and the radiating part is like a little joke to nuclear operator radiation. So my new
Oh, cool.
podcast, Radiating Faith,
Hmm.
and my website is the greatest source of information. It's going, I'm renovating it right now, but it has every episode categorized. It has every guest who's been on my show, all my social medias. You can find me on Facebook as Mark Whiskey. You can find me on LinkedIn as Mr. Whiskey. You can find me on Instagram, Couple of Nukes Podcast. And I think the greatest thing is I do have couple of nukes at gmail.com. And that's couple of nukes at gmail.com.
Okay.
And you can reach out to me on there to be a guest on my show, to have me on your show, any business connections, or just to talk. And you can actually
Mhm.
download this app called Owl and call me on there as well, and I'll answer. And
Yep.
so, but I'm open to any way you send me a message, whether it's email, if you message me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm very responsive. I'm always looking to help people and make connections and spread the good word of God and the message of the military, from my story to stories of others. And even, family trauma. I mean, I'm supposed to be on a couple of shows about domestic violence and, alcoholism and addiction. I talk about all those things. So, that if you want to reach out to me, I'm down for it. And yeah, all I ask is check out my show if you're interested in me
Yeah.
or my content, and share it with whoever needs to hear it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you one thing I'm seeing right now is I think you'll probably be going beyond podcasts. I
Thank
definitely
you.
see you probably going to schools, maybe military bases. I don't know, but you will definitely be on stages and talking about your experience, no doubt, and helping people that way too. Yeah.
Thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Well, Ms. Paula, thank you so much for this opportunity and this platform through your show to reach people and hopefully inspire or inform someone and get them the help they need or the wisdom to help other people.
Well, it was my pleasure. I learned so much just talking to you. So I'm appreciative of you being here. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody who's watching the replay. Once again, if you want to be a guest, if you've overcome an illness, going through an illness, like I said, it doesn't have to be a physical illness. It can be something emotional like suicide or anything like that. Reach out to me at info@enrichyourhealth.com with a UR, or Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger. I'm looking for sponsors, people to be in my business spotlight. Just go ahead and reach out to me. Got some amazing shows coming up, so I'm excited about that. So we are on every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Again, it's Overcoming Illness. I'm a one-on-one coach, group coach. So please reach out if you need somebody to help you with recipes. If you suffered from autoimmune issues, any kind of illness that you just need to customize your diet and eat healthier, so you feel better. Stop living a life of pain. Now, to say that without full disclosure, everybody's different. Not medical advice. So thank you again, Mr. Whiskey. This has been great. I really appreciate you being on tonight, and I'm sure even if we help one person, it's worth you being here. So I hope
Amen to
everybody
that.
follows you and sees everything that you're doing. And I can't wait till the book comes out. You'll have to come on again and talk about the book. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank
All
you
right.
kindly.
Well, thank you, everybody. We will see you next Sunday. Have a good day, everybody.